This story follows Amy Roloff and Marek as they face an unexpected and life-changing situation. At a stage in life when both believed their journey was settled, Amy becomes pregnant with twin baby girls. While Amy slowly embraces the pregnancy as a miracle and a second chance at purpose, struggles to accept the reality. The news brings fear, emotional pressure, and a sense of lost control for him. As the pregnancy progresses and the twins are born, the emotional gap between them grows. Amy becomes fully committed to motherhood, while feels overwhelmed and unhappy, unable to connect emotionally in the same way. His silence and emotional distance leave Amy feeling alone during one of the most vulnerable periods of her life. Despite love and mutual respect, the couple realizes that they are experiencing the same situation in completely different ways. Counseling and effort cannot erase Chris's unhappiness or Amy's need for emotional security. Eventually, they face the painful truth that staying together out of obligation may harm both themselves and their children. In the end, Amy and choose separation, not as a failure, but as an act of honesty and responsibility. They agree to prioritize the well-being of their twin daughters above everything else. Amy finds strength and peace in motherhood, while accepts his truth and commits to being a present, respectful father. The story concludes with a quiet, mature ending, two adults choosing honesty over illusion, and creating a future where their children grow up surrounded by real love, even if it comes from two separate paths. This story begins at a stage in life where surprises were no longer welcome. Amy Roloff believed her journey had finally slowed down. She had already lived through marriage, heartbreak, public judgment, and emotional exhaustion. By the time she married Marek, she wanted peace more than passion. Wanted the same thing, or at least, that is what Amy believed. Their life together was built on routine. Quiet mornings. Predictable plans. A future that felt controlled and safe. There was no talk of starting over, no talk of new responsibilities, and certainly no talk of children. That chapter was supposed to be closed forever. Then came the news that no one expected. Amy was pregnant. At first, neither of them reacted the way people imagine. There was no celebration, no excitement, no tears of joy. It felt unreal, almost like a mistake. At their age, pregnancy felt impossible. But reality became unavoidable when the doctor confirmed it again. And then came the second confirmation. Twins. 2 babies. 2 girls. For Amy, something shifted immediately. Shock turned into emotion. Emotion turned into hope. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose that went beyond fear. But did not feel hope. He felt trapped. From that very moment, their reactions began to separate in ways neither of them wanted to admit. Amy tried to talk about the future. Names. Possibilities. How life might change. She spoke carefully, knowing the situation was sensitive. Listened, but he didn't engage. Inside his mind, a different conversation was happening. He had already raised children. He had already lived that phase. He had built his life around independence and control. Now everything felt like it was being taken away. He began to ask himself questions he never voiced out loud. What if I am too old for this? What if something goes wrong? What if I don't have the energy? What if I resent this life? Those thoughts did not make him a bad person, but they made him distant. Amy noticed the change quickly. Stopped initiating conversations. He avoided long discussions. He became quieter, more reserved, more absent. Amy tried to convince herself it was just shock. But deep down, she felt something else. Wasn't just afraid. He was unhappy. As the pregnancy progressed, the gap between them grew wider. Amy leaned into the experience, attending appointments, reading, preparing herself emotionally. Attended when necessary, but his heart was not present. Every ultrasound reminded him of responsibility. Every heartbeat reminded him of a future he never agreed to. And yet, he stayed silent. Because admitting the truth would change everything. This silence became the most dangerous part of their relationship. Amy felt alone, not physically, but emotionally. She was carrying two lives, but she felt like she was doing it without a partner. Chris began to feel guilty for emotions he couldn't control. He loved Amy. But he did not love the situation. And that conflict slowly started tearing him apart from the inside. The twins had not even been born yet, and already, the marriage was under pressure it had never experienced before. And this was only the beginning. As the months passed, the reality of the pregnancy became impossible to ignore. Amy's body changed quickly. Every movement reminded her that this was not an ordinary situation. Carrying twins was physically exhausting, emotionally overwhelming, and medically risky. Yet, despite the discomfort and fear, she tried to stay positive. Chris watched all of this from a distance. He helped when asked. He showed up when required. But emotionally, he was pulling further away. Amy began to notice small things. Chris no longer asked how she was feeling. He avoided talking about the babies. He changed the subject whenever the future came up. What hurt Amy the most was not his fear, it was his silence. She needed reassurance. She needed partnership. She needed to know she wasn't alone. Instead, she felt like she was preparing for motherhood by herself. Chris, on the other hand, felt overwhelmed in a way he couldn't explain. Every conversation felt like pressure. Every plan felt like a commitment he wasn't ready to make. In his mind, these twins represented the end of the life he had carefully built. He began spending more time alone. Long drives. Late nights. Quiet mornings without conversation. Amy noticed. And she asked. At first, gently. Then more directly. Chris tried to explain, but the words never came out right. How do you tell your wife that you are unhappy about something that has already happened? How do you admit that the joy she feels is not something you share? So he avoided the truth. That avoidance slowly turned into emotional distance. Family members began to sense something was wrong. The excitement around the twins did not feel shared. Friends noticed Chris's lack of enthusiasm. Amy defended him every time. He's just processing. He needs time. This is a lot for him. But privately, she was breaking. She felt rejected. She felt confused. She felt scared. This was supposed to be a shared journey, but it didn't feel that way. As the due date grew closer, the pressure increased. Doctors warned them about possible complications. Amy's stress levels rose. She needed stability more than ever. Chris felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Twins meant double everything. Double care. Double risk. Double sacrifice. And he wasn't sure he was ready to give up the life he loved. One night, everything changed. Amy asked him a question she had been holding back for months. Are you happy about the babies? Chris stayed silent. That silence answered more than words ever could. Amy felt her heart sink. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider a terrifying possibility, that love alone might not be enough to hold this marriage together. Chris felt ashamed. Amy felt abandoned. And between them, two unborn lives were already shaping a future neither of them fully agreed on. This wasn't just about twins anymore. It was about honesty. It was about fear. It was about whether their marriage could survive a reality neither of them planned for. And the hardest part was still ahead. After that night, nothing felt the same. Amy stopped asking questions she was afraid to hear the answers to. She focused on getting through each day, each appointment, each physical challenge that came with carrying twins. Outwardly, she stayed strong. Inwardly, she felt deeply alone. Chris became more withdrawn. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cruel. But he was emotionally absent. And sometimes, absence hurts more than conflict. Amy began to realize that Chris's unhappiness wasn't temporary. It wasn't shock. It wasn't adjustment. It was resistance. He was mourning a life he felt he was losing. As the pregnancy advanced, doctors became more cautious. There were more checkups, more warnings, more reminders that this was a high-risk situation. Amy tried to share these fears with Chris, hoping it would bring them closer. Instead, it pushed him further away. Fear made him shut down. Stress made him silent. He started thinking in practical terms rather than emotional ones. How will we manage? What if something goes wrong? What happens to our freedom? What happens to us? Amy noticed that Chris talked less about we and more about I. That shift frightened her. Because marriage, especially in moments like this, requires unity. And unity was slipping away. When the babies were finally born, 2 healthy twin girls, the room was filled with emotion. Amy cried. Family members cried. Nurses smiled. Chris stood there, holding one of the babies, trying to feel what everyone else seemed to feel naturally. But instead of joy, he felt panic. The reality was no longer abstract. It was in his arms. It was permanent. He smiled for others. He said the right words. But inside, he felt disconnected. Amy saw it. She saw the hesitation. She saw the forced smiles. She saw the emotional gap that no one else noticed. Bringing the twins home should have been a moment of unity. Instead, it exposed everything. Sleepless nights. Constant crying. Endless responsibility. Amy pushed through exhaustion because she had no choice. Chris struggled in silence. He helped physically, but emotionally, he was overwhelmed. The life he had imagined, quiet evenings, independence, control, was gone. And resentment began to grow. Not toward the babies. But toward the situation. Toward the expectations placed on him. Toward a life he never consented to. Amy sensed it. And that realization broke her heart. She started questioning herself. Did I force this? Did I ignore his feelings? Did I mistake love for agreement? Chris started questioning the marriage. Not because he didn't care. But because he felt trapped in a life he didn't choose. 2 people. 1 love. 2 very different emotional realities. The twins became the center of their world, but also the silent divider between them. And soon, they would have to face the question neither of them wanted to ask out loud. Can a marriage survive when one partner's miracle feels like the other partner's loss? The answer was coming. And it wouldn't be easy. The weeks after bringing the twins home were the hardest either of them had ever experienced. Sleep became rare. Silence disappeared. Time no longer belonged to them. Amy moved through each day on instinct. Feeding schedules, medical checks, constant attention. Her body was exhausted, but her mind stayed focused on the girls. They depended on her completely, and that gave her strength. Chris did not adapt the same way. The pressure affected him differently. He felt like his entire identity had been erased. His routines were gone. His freedom was gone. Even his relationship felt unfamiliar. Conversations with Amy revolved only around the babies. There was no space left for him. Instead of expressing that feeling, he withdrew. Amy noticed that Chris spent more time away from the house. Sometimes he said he needed air. Sometimes he said he needed to clear his head. Sometimes he said nothing at all. What Amy needed most during this time was emotional reassurance. What Chris needed was escape. That difference slowly created resentment on both sides. Amy began to feel that Chris was choosing himself over their family. Chris began to feel that no one noticed how overwhelmed he was. Neither of them felt understood. Arguments started quietly. Not shouting. Not anger. Just tired voices and unfinished sentences. Amy would say she needed more support. Chris would say he was trying. But trying didn't feel like enough anymore. One night, after the twins finally fell asleep, Amy sat across from Chris and asked him a question she had been avoiding since the birth. Do you regret this? Chris didn't answer immediately. That pause changed everything. He finally admitted what he had been hiding for months. He said he felt unprepared. He said he felt unhappy. He said he felt like his life had been taken in a direction he never chose. Amy listened in silence. When he finished, she didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded. Because deep down, she already knew. That moment marked a shift in their marriage. The problem was no longer unspoken. It was real. And it was heavy. Amy felt guilt. Chris felt relief. But relief came with consequences. Because once the truth is spoken, it can't be taken back. They tried counseling. They tried conversations. They tried compromise. But love was now mixed with resentment, and that made everything fragile. Chris cared about the twins, but bonding didn't come naturally. Amy noticed that, too. She worried about what that distance would mean for the future. Not just for the marriage, but for the children. Amy began to ask herself a painful question. Is it better to stay in a marriage filled with quiet unhappiness, or to choose peace for everyone, even if it means separation? Chris asked himself something equally painful. Is staying the right thing to do if my heart isn't fully in it? Neither of them wanted to hurt the twins. Neither of them wanted to fail. Neither of them wanted to be the villain. But reality does not care about intentions. It only cares about truth. And the truth was this. The twins had changed everything. And now, Amy and Chris were standing at a crossroads they never imagined reaching together. What they chose next would define not just their marriage, but the lives of two innocent girls. The days that followed were heavy with uncertainty. Nothing was officially decided, but everything felt fragile. Amy and Chris moved around each other carefully, like two people afraid that one wrong word could cause everything to collapse. Conversations became practical, not emotional. Who would feed the twins? Who would handle appointments? Who would stay up at night? They functioned as parents. But as partners, something was missing. Amy began to realize that love, by itself, could not fix what they were facing. She loved Chris. She believed he loved her. But love did not erase resentment. Love did not remove fear. And love did not automatically create happiness. Chris tried to be more present. He made an effort to help more with the twins. He forced himself into routines he never wanted. From the outside, it looked like improvement. Inside, he was exhausted. Every smile felt forced. Every responsibility felt heavier. Every day felt like he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. Amy noticed the effort, but she also noticed the cost. Chris was becoming quieter. Less expressive. More distant emotionally. She began to worry that staying together like this would damage all of them, including the twins. Late at night, when the house was finally quiet, Amy allowed herself to think about the future honestly. Not the version she hoped for, but the one that felt real. A future where Chris stayed, but unhappy. A future where tension became normal. A future where the twins grew up sensing emotional distance. That thought terrified her. Chris, meanwhile, was facing his own truth. He realized that staying out of guilt would only turn into resentment. He didn't want to wake up years later feeling trapped, angry, and disconnected from his own family. One evening, after another long day, Chris finally said what neither of them wanted to hear. I don't know if I can be the husband you need in this situation. Amy didn't react immediately. She had already felt those words long before he spoke them. What hurt most was not the possibility of separation. It was the realization that they were no longer moving forward together. They were standing still, holding on to something that was slowly breaking. They talked for hours that night. Not arguing. Not blaming. Just honesty. Chris admitted that he felt overwhelmed beyond repair. Amy admitted that she felt emotionally abandoned when she needed him most. There were tears. There was silence. There was understanding. And there was grief. Because sometimes, two good people find themselves in a situation where no one is wrong, but no one is happy either. The twins slept peacefully in the next room, unaware of the weight their parents were carrying. They were innocent, loved, protected. And that made the decision even harder. Amy knew one thing clearly. She would choose stability and emotional health for her daughters, even if it meant letting go of the marriage she hoped would last forever. Chris knew something too. Staying out of obligation would not make him a better father or a better partner. And so, quietly, without announcements or drama, they began discussing what separation might look like. Not as enemies, but as two adults trying to do the least damage possible. The hardest part was still ahead. Because choosing honesty often comes with loss. And the final decision had not yet been made. Extra scene, option, full stop. The conversation about separation did not happen overnight. Amy and Chris took time. Days passed. Then weeks. They continued living under the same roof, caring for the twins together, but emotionally they were already standing apart. There was respect, but no closeness. Cooperation, but no warmth. Amy slowly accepted a painful truth. She could not force happiness out of love alone. Chris could stay. He could help. He could perform the role. But Amy didn't want a partner who was present only out of duty. She didn't want her daughters to grow up watching emotional distance disguised as stability. Chris, too, came to his own realization. He saw how strong Amy was becoming on her own. How naturally she bonded with the twins. How she carried the emotional weight of the family without complaint. And he saw something else as well. He saw that his unhappiness was becoming a burden. Not because Amy blamed him, but because she deserved more than quiet disappointment. One night, Chris admitted something he had never said out loud before. He said that he admired Amy. He said that she was an incredible mother. He said that the twins deserved a home filled with certainty, not confusion. And then he said the hardest part. I think letting go might be the most honest thing I can do. Amy cried that night, not because she was surprised, but because it confirmed what her heart had already accepted. There was no anger left. Only sadness and clarity. They agreed on one thing immediately. The twins would come first. Always. There would be no public drama. No bitterness. No blame. Just a quiet decision to stop pretending. They chose separation not as a failure, but as an act of responsibility. In the weeks that followed, life slowly adjusted. Chris remained involved as a father. He showed up. He learned. He tried in ways that felt genuine, not forced. Amy focused on creating a stable, loving environment for her daughters. Something unexpected happened. Once the pressure of pretending was gone, the tension eased. Amy felt lighter. Chris felt more honest. They were no longer trying to save a marriage that had already reached its limit. Instead, they were learning how to coexist with respect. Amy found strength she didn't know she had. Motherhood grounded her. The twins became her emotional anchor, not her burden. Every sleepless night felt worth it because it was hers, chosen, not shared reluctantly. Chris, in time, faced his emotions more openly. He accepted that unhappiness did not make him heartless, but ignoring it would have made him resentful. He worked on himself, knowing that being emotionally healthy mattered more than fitting into an expected role. In the end, there was no dramatic collapse. Just two adults accepting reality. Amy chose peace over illusion. Chris chose honesty over obligation. And the twins grew up surrounded by love, not perfect love, but real love. Sometimes, the strongest ending isn't staying together at all costs. Sometimes, it's knowing when to let go, so everyone involved can breathe again.